For more now, let me bring in Mark Regev, chief spokesman for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mark, it's nice to see you again. May I talk about the specifics and what's been going on the last 24 hours? How does your government respond to the reports of a Palestinian man killed by Israeli forces on the Gaza border?
We're still looking into it. The preliminary reports say that there was a violent riot right on the border fence and some people tried to push their way through. Our soldiers had orders to shoot in the air. We're looking into what happened, but on the whole, the picture is good. The ceasefire seems to be holding, and from our point of view, that's what we wanted. We wanted to establish peace and quiet for our people in southern Israel, who've been on the receiving end of these rockets for much too long, and they're now coming out of the bomb shelters in the last few days, have been enjoying seeing the sunlight and having a normal life. That's what this was all about for us.
Mark, the next phase of the ceasefire calls for opening the border crossings, letting people through, goods through and the like. How and when will that be implemented?
Well, we're going to having these discussions with Egypt. These will be Israeli-Egyptian discussions on looking at the different restrictions. But you've got to understand why we imposed restrictions in the first place. There's cause and effect. We imposed the restrictions because there was hostile fire from Gaza into Israel. They were shooting rockets at our people. They were shooting at our farmers with small arm fire. So, of course, you couldn't have normal relations when they were so hostile. Now, if we're going to have a period of quiet, as the understandings reached through the Egyptian state, if there's going to be quiet, of course, then Israel is in a position to move forward and be more flexible on some of these issues.
The ceasefire negotiations with President Morsi, does it give you an indication of what his presidency is going to mean for Israel?
You know, Israel and Egypt fought wars in the past. We fought bloody wars and people on both sides lost their lives in 1948, in 1956, in 1967, and again in 1973. In the late 1970s, we signed a peace treaty with Egypt that has brought peace to the Israeli-Egyptian border. And I think that's an interest of both countries to keep that peace treaty. That's an Israeli interest, that's an Egyptian interest. Now, we've got Hamas there in the Gaza Strip that shares a common border with Egypt and with Israel. And we'd think that both sides have an interest to make sure that Hamas and the other extremists in Gaza don't stir up trouble, don't cause friction, don't create violence. And I think we and the Egyptians can work together on keeping the peace and on trying to make sure that terrorists don't dictate the agenda.
Mark, suggestions that this past 8-9 days was a practice run, if you will, for any future confrontation with Iran, testing your Iron Dome, identifying Hamas's capabilities. Is that true? And if so, what did you learn?
Well, first of all, we know that those rockets that were fired at Tel Aviv and Jerusalem weren't made in the Gaza Strip. Metaphorically speaking, they had "made in Iran" printed on them very clearly. And this is also a threat for the future, because Hamas has come out of this crisis greatly weakened. We've destroyed most of their arsenal, and they fired a bit at us, and there's very little left. And we know the Iranians will act very expeditiously to try to rearm Hamas, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us, everyone who wants to see peace and stability. We don't want to see these sort of extremists once again get their hands on Iranian weapons. Now, the United States and Israel have been talking about preventing that from happening, and I think the Egyptians have a part to play here too, and if we all play a role in preventing the Hamas from being rearmed by Iran, I think we're in for a more stable and quiet period ahead.
We can all hope. Mark Regev, many thanks for your time. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to hear from the other side of the conflict.